She smiled across the cafe table and asked a question that sounded playful, almost harmless. If I planned the perfect date, would you trust me enough not to ask any questions? I laughed and answered yes without thinking. That single word changed everything I believed about myself. I thought I was agreeing to dinner and a movie. I had no idea I was agreeing to the most unforgettable day of my life, a day that would quietly replace fear with confidence, embarrassment with curiosity, and a version of myself I had never allowed to exist. If you've ever wondered how one ordinary date could completely reshape the way someone sees themselves, stay with me because every decision I made after that question became impossible to undo. Emily had always been different from anyone I had dated before. She never judged people for how they dressed or what made them happy. She noticed little things that everyone else ignored. She once caught me staring at a pair of elegant heels in a shop window. Instead of teasing me, she simply smiled and asked, "Pretty, aren't they?" I quickly looked away and pretended I had been looking at something else. She never brought it up again, but I always wondered if she had noticed more than I realized. On the morning of our mystery date, she texted me one simple instruction: wear comfortable clothes. Trust me, that was all. I arrived outside her apartment wearing jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie. She greeted me with an excited smile that made it impossible to stay nervous. "I have 3 surprises today," she said while taking my hand. "You only get to know them one at a time. What if I don't like one of them? You can say no whenever you want." That answer relaxed me more than anything else. She wasn't forcing me into anything. She simply wanted me to experience something new. We drove across town instead of toward the restaurants we usually visited. Eventually, we stopped outside a small fashion studio hidden between a florist and a bookstore. It looked elegant but private. There were no crowds, no large windows, just soft lighting behind frosted glass. "What are we doing here?" I asked. Emily squeezed my hand. "Having fun." Inside, an older woman welcomed us warmly, as if she had been expecting our arrival. "You must be Daniel," she said. I nodded, confused. Emily smiled. "I booked the private fitting." The words barely registered. "Private fitting?" The woman spoke gently. "Nothing happens unless you're comfortable. Think of today as trying something completely different." I looked at Emily. "You planned this?" "I did." "For me?" She nodded. "You've always been curious." "I never said that." "You never had to." I felt my face becoming warm. She continued quietly. "You always pause near clothing stores. You always compliment elegant outfits before you compliment mine. You always ask how difficult makeup must be. You notice fabrics, colors, and shoes more than any boyfriend I've ever met. Curiosity isn't something to be embarrassed about." I wanted to deny everything, but every word was true. "I thought you'd think I was weird." Emily laughed softly. "I think you're honest. That's much more interesting." The stylist disappeared briefly before returning with several garment bags. "We'll start simple." She handed me a soft cardigan. "Feel this." I rubbed the fabric between my fingers. "It's really comfortable." She smiled. "Exactly." Then she showed me a flowing blouse with delicate sleeves. I hesitated. "I've never worn anything like this." "You've never tried," Emily corrected. There was a difference. The fitting room felt strangely peaceful. No mirrors surrounded me, only one large mirror facing the door. The stylist explained every piece without pressure, talking about fabrics, colors, and how different cuts suited different body types. She treated the clothes as simply clothes, not something forbidden. That changed everything. I slowly changed into the blouse. It fit surprisingly well. Not perfectly, not magically, just comfortably. When I looked down, I expected panic. Instead, I felt curiosity. Emily knocked gently. "Can I come in?" I took a deep breath. "Okay." She entered slowly, giving me enough space to change my mind. For several long seconds, she said nothing. Then she smiled. "You look comfortable." Not beautiful, not feminine. Comfortable. That single word removed so much pressure. "I don't look ridiculous?" She shook her head immediately. "You look like someone trying something new." The stylist adjusted the sleeves slightly. Better. Emily nodded. Much better. I found myself smiling without realizing it. The next outfit included slim trousers designed with a softer cut and lightweight flats instead of trainers. Walking felt different. My posture changed naturally. I stood straighter, without even thinking about it. Emily noticed. See? See what? You stopped hiding. I hadn't even realized I usually slouched. The stylist brought out a simple shoulder-length wig. You don't have to wear it. I stared at it, then back at Emily. She never asked. She simply waited. After nearly a minute, I surprised both of us. I'll try. The stylist carefully adjusted it until it framed my face naturally. She turned the chair toward the mirror. For a moment, I didn't recognize myself. I wasn't looking at another person. I was looking at another possibility. No dramatic transformation. No impossible fantasy. Just a version of myself expressing something I had buried for years. Emily stood beside me. What are you thinking? I smiled nervously. I expected a laugh. And I can't. Why? Because I actually like how I feel. Those words shocked me as much as they shocked anyone else. Emily reached over and fixed one loose strand of hair. You know what I like most? What? You're smiling with your eyes. I looked closer. She was right. It wasn't about the clothes anymore. It was about the confidence quietly appearing underneath them. For the first time in years, I wasn't wondering whether strangers would approve of me. I was wondering why I had spent so many years afraid to explore something so harmless. And the day was only beginning. When we finally stepped outside the fitting room, I expected the date to be over. I thought Emily had simply wanted me to try on a few outfits to satisfy my curiosity. Instead, she smiled with the same mysterious expression she had worn all morning. Ready for surprise number 2? I laughed nervously. There's more? Oh, much more. The stylist handed me a small tote bag containing the blouse, trousers, and flats I had just worn. These are yours. I blinked. What? Emily grinned. My gift. You bought these? I wanted you to have something that reminded you today wasn't just imagination. I looked inside the bag, running my fingers over the soft fabric again. It felt different now. A few hours earlier, I would never have imagined taking women's clothing home. Now the thought didn't scare me nearly as much. You don't have to wear them outside, Emily said gently. I only wanted you to know they're yours if you ever want them. I nodded quietly. Thank you. Those 2 words carried far more emotion than I expected. We left the boutique and walked a few streets before stopping at a quiet beauty studio. It wasn't a busy salon with dozens of customers. Emily had booked a private appointment. I looked at the sign. No. She laughed. Yes. Emily, trust me one more time. I looked at the door for several seconds. I've never even been inside a place like this. Neither had I before my first visit. What if I look stupid? You won't. What if I hate it? Then we leave. Every answer she gave removed another excuse. Inside, the makeup artist welcomed us warmly. So, you're Daniel. I smiled awkwardly. I guess everyone knows my name today. Emily laughed. I may have planned this for weeks. The makeup artist motioned toward a comfortable chair. We'll keep everything natural. Today's about learning, not changing who you are. Learning. That word immediately relaxed me. She didn't rush into applying products. Instead, she placed several items on the table. This is primer. She explained what it did. This is foundation. She matched the color to my skin instead of making me look pale or artificial. This is concealer. She showed how tiny amounts could brighten the face without looking obvious. I realized makeup wasn't random. Every product had a purpose. Emily watched me with an amused smile. You look like you're attending a science class. I kind of am. The makeup artist laughed. Most people think makeup is about hiding. Good makeup is usually about enhancing what's already there. As she worked, she explained every step slowly enough that I could actually remember it. Small brush. Light pressure. Blend instead of covering. Less product. More patience. It wasn't magic. It was technique. I found myself asking questions without embarrassment. What brush is that? Why blend upward? Why use powder afterwards? Emily raised an eyebrow. You've asked more questions in 10 minutes than you ask me in a month. I didn't know there was so much to learn. The artist smiled. Curiosity makes learning easy. When she finally handed me the mirror, I expected something dramatic. Instead, I simply looked rested. My skin looked smoother. My eyes appeared brighter. Nothing looked exaggerated. I still look like me. Exactly, the artist replied. That's the goal. Emily smiled proudly. I knew you'd understand. Next came something I had secretly wondered about for years. Lip color. The artist held up 3 shades. Which one feels right? I looked at Emily. I have no idea. She pointed to the softest shade. Start simple. The artist carefully applied it before handing me the mirror again. It wasn't bright. It wasn't flashy. It simply added warmth. Without thinking, I smiled. Then laughed. I actually like this. Emily folded her arms. I know. You knew. I had a feeling. After removing the makeup, the artist packed a small beginner kit. I pushed it back politely. I can't accept this. Emily pushed it toward me again. It's part of your present. You bought this too? She nodded. I wanted you to be able to practice if you ever wanted. I stared at the small bag. Nobody had ever supported me this way before. Nobody had ever treated my curiosity as something worth encouraging instead of something to hide. As we left the salon, the afternoon sun filled the streets with golden light. I expected us to head home. Instead, Emily looked at her watch. Perfect timing. For what? Our final surprise. You planned 3. I told you. She led me into a quiet park where people were reading books, walking dogs, and enjoying the afternoon. We sat on a bench overlooking a small lake. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, she turned toward me. Can I tell you why I planned today? I nodded. The first time we met, you apologized for complimenting my dress. I remembered. I thought it sounded strange. You said, I wish I understood how clothes like that feel. I buried my face in my hands. I actually said that? You did. I was so embarrassed. I wasn't. She took my hand. I realized you weren't talking about fashion. I stayed silent. You were talking about permission. Those words hit me harder than anything else she had said all day. She continued softly. Everyone deserves to explore harmless parts of themselves without shame. I looked across the lake. I've spent years convincing myself these thoughts made me weird. They make you human. I was terrified someone would find out. And now, I looked down at the shopping bag resting beside my feet. Now I think I was mostly afraid of myself. Emily smiled gently. Fear gets loud when curiosity stays quiet. The evening breeze moved through the trees as we sat together. For the first time in years, I wasn't imagining what life would be like if I stopped pretending. I was beginning to imagine what life could become if I finally stopped hiding. Emily stood and held out her hand. Come on. Where are we going now? She smiled with that familiar, mysterious grin. The date isn't over yet. And as I followed her down the path, carrying the bag that represented far more than just clothes, I realized I wasn't simply following my girlfriend anymore. I was taking the first real steps toward discovering a version of myself I had never dared to meet. As we walked out of the park, the sky was beginning to turn orange. I assumed we were finally heading home, but Emily reached into her handbag and handed me a small envelope. What now? I asked with a nervous laugh. Open it. Inside was a handwritten card. One last challenge. Underneath was a single sentence. Be yourself for 1 hour and let me worry about everything else. I looked at her. What does that mean? She smiled. It means tonight you stop thinking about what everyone else expects. Before I could ask another question, she led me toward a quiet apartment building only a few streets away. Whose place is this? My sister's. I stopped walking. Emily. She's away for the weekend. She said we could use her apartment. What for? So you can experience something without feeling rushed. When we entered, everything felt peaceful. Soft lighting filled the living room, Gentle music played quietly in the background, and several shopping bags sat neatly beside the sofa. I looked at them. Please tell me those aren't. They are. I laughed despite myself. You really planned every minute. I told you this wasn't an ordinary date. She opened the first bag. Inside was a simple knee-length floral dress. Not glamorous, not flashy, just elegant. The second contained a lightweight cardigan. The third held comfortable ballet flats. Everything looked tasteful and surprisingly normal. I thought you'd pick something dramatic. Emily shook her head. This isn't about costumes. She placed the dress in my hands. It's about discovering comfort. For a long moment, I simply stood there. Months ago, I would have refused immediately. Now I was thinking about how the fabric might feel. Emily noticed the hesitation. You can stop at any time. I know. No pressure. I know. After taking a deep breath, I disappeared into the spare bedroom. Closing the door behind me, I looked at the dress hanging from my hands. This is crazy, I whispered. Yet somehow, it didn't feel wrong anymore. Slowly I changed. The soft fabric rested lightly against my skin. It wasn't the dress itself that surprised me. It was how calm I felt wearing it. I slipped on the cardigan, then the flats. Finally, I looked into the full-length mirror. I expected guilt. Instead, I felt peaceful. There was still plenty to improve. The fit wasn't perfect. My posture still looked uncertain. But I wasn't trying to become someone else. I was simply allowing another side of myself to exist. Emily knocked softly. No rush. I'm almost ready. When I finally opened the door, she looked up from the sofa. For several seconds, she said absolutely nothing. That silence made me even more nervous. Finally, she smiled. There you are. That's all you're going to say? What do you want me to say? I don't know. You look comfortable. She had used that same word earlier. Comfortable. Not beautiful. Not perfect. Comfortable. It reminded me that this journey wasn't about chasing impossible standards. It was about feeling at peace. Emily walked over and gently adjusted the cardigan sleeve. There. Better? A lot. She disappeared into another room before returning with a small jewelry box. Oh no. Oh yes. Inside was a delicate silver necklace. Really? It completes the outfit. She fastened it carefully. The necklace was simple, almost unnoticeable, yet somehow it made the entire outfit feel complete. I looked in the mirror again. The reflection still surprised me, but now it also made me smile. Emily noticed. You're smiling again. I didn't realize. You've done that every time you stop worrying. She handed me a phone. Take a picture. I froze. I can't. Why not? What if someone sees it? She opened the gallery. The phone is offline. I still hesitated. Then, click. The first picture. I looked at it. Instead of deleting it immediately like I imagined I would, I kept looking. I don't hate it. Emily laughed. Progress. She encouraged me to experiment with different poses. Not exaggerated. Just natural. Standing by the window. Sitting on the sofa. Holding a cup of tea. Walking slowly across the room. Each picture looked more relaxed than the last. I realized confidence wasn't something that suddenly appeared. It grew little by little. Every small step replaced a little fear with a little experience. After a while, Emily disappeared into the kitchen. I'm making dinner. You don't need help? I do. She smiled mischievously. But you're helping exactly as you are. I looked down at the dress. You mean? I mean exactly that. For the first time that day, I walked naturally through the apartment without thinking about every movement. The dress stopped feeling unusual. The flats stopped feeling unfamiliar. Even the necklace faded into the background. Everything simply became normal. While chopping vegetables, Emily suddenly asked, "Can I ask you something?" Sure. If nobody in the world judged you. She paused. Would you explore this more? The knife in my hand stopped moving. I thought carefully before answering. I think. I swallowed. I think I would. Saying those words out loud felt terrifying, but it also felt honest. Emily smiled without looking surprised. I thought so. You already knew? I suspected.
How?
Because today wasn't changing you. She looked directly into my eyes. It was removing fear. Dinner was simple but delicious. We laughed about awkward moments from the day, about my nervous expression in the boutique, about how I had nearly dropped the makeup brush, about how long I stared at myself in the mirror before opening the fitting room door. Every memory that had seemed frightening just hours earlier had already become something we could laugh about together. Later that evening we sat on the balcony watching the city lights appear one by one. Emily handed me a small wrapped box. I thought there were only 3 surprises. She smiled. I lied. I slowly unwrapped it. Inside was a compact mirror. On the inside cover she'd attached a tiny, handwritten note. Never be afraid of the person smiling back at you. I read it twice, then a 3rd time. Without warning, my eyes began to water. Emily quietly moved closer. You okay? I nodded. I've spent so many years pretending parts of me didn't exist. You don't have to pretend with me. That sentence stayed with me long after the conversation ended. When it was finally time to change back into my usual clothes, something unexpected happened. I folded the dress carefully instead of rushing to take it off. I placed the cardigan neatly into its bag. I cleaned the flats before putting them back into the box. Emily noticed every little movement. You've changed. I smiled. I think you're right, but not because of the clothes.
No.
I looked once more at the reflection in the hallway mirror before changing. The clothes didn't change me. I paused, realizing something that had been true all along. They simply helped me meet a side of myself I'd been too afraid to understand. As we walked out of the apartment together, hand in hand, I realized the mystery date had never really been about fashion, makeup, or dresses.
It had been about trust.
Trust in the person beside me, and, for the very first time, trust in myself. I still had no idea what the future would look like, but I knew one thing with complete certainty. The boy who had nervously agreed to a mystery date that morning wasn't the same person walking home beside Emily that night. The date had ended, but the journey of self-discovery had only just begun. The drive home felt strangely quiet, but it wasn't the uncomfortable silence I had expected. Every few minutes I caught myself looking out of the window, and then smiling for no reason at all. Emily noticed. You keep thinking. I know. Regretting today? I looked at her and answered without hesitation. Not even a little. She smiled before returning her attention to the road. I'm glad. When she dropped me off outside my apartment, she didn't ask whether I would ever wear those clothes again. She didn't ask whether I had changed forever. She simply handed me the shopping bag and the small makeup kit. Take your time. You're not going to ask?
No.
Why? Because today wasn't about getting an answer. She gently squeezed my hand. It was about giving yourself permission to ask questions. I watched her drive away before carrying the bag upstairs. For several minutes, it sat untouched beside my sofa. Part of me wanted to hide it in the back of a wardrobe. Another part wanted to open it immediately. Curiosity won. I carefully removed every item, folding each piece neatly across the bed.
The blouse.
The cardigan. The flats. The necklace. The compact mirror with Emily's handwritten message. I picked up the mirror again. Never be afraid of the person smiling back at you. For the first time, those words didn't feel like encouragement from someone else. They felt like advice I was finally ready to believe. Over the next few days, life returned to normal on the outside. I went to work, met friends, answered emails, and followed my usual routine. But something inside me had shifted. Instead of feeling embarrassed by my curiosity, I found myself learning. I watched tutorials about clothing care, color matching, and simple styling. I read about confidence, self-expression, and how many people explored fashion without trying to fit into someone else's expectations. One evening I opened the shopping bag again. No pressure. No audience. No expectations. I changed into the blouse and cardigan, looked in the mirror, and smiled. It no longer felt like pretending. It simply felt peaceful. A week later, Emily came over for dinner. She noticed the cardigan hanging neatly on a chair. You've been practicing. I laughed. Was it that obvious? A little. I've even learned how to fold it properly. She smiled proudly. I knew you would. I also realized something. What? I spent years worrying about what strangers might think. And now, I realize the people who genuinely care about me are interested in whether I'm happy, not whether I fit someone else's idea of normal. Emily reached across the table. That's a lesson many people never learn. As the weeks passed, I became more confident in small, ordinary ways. I learned that confidence didn't come from wearing one specific outfit. It came from accepting that different interests could exist without shame. Sometimes I wore the clothes at home while reading a book or listening to music. Sometimes I simply experimented with colors or practiced the makeup techniques the artist had shown me. Every step was my own choice, taken at my own pace. One Saturday, Emily handed me another envelope. I laughed. Should I be worried? Not this time. Inside were 2 tickets to a fashion exhibition celebrating clothing design from different cultures and time periods. I thought you'd enjoy seeing how fashion tells stories, she said. We spent hours walking through the exhibition, looking at elegant tailoring, traditional garments, and modern designs. What surprised me most was learning how often fashion had changed throughout history. Styles that were once considered unusual had become ordinary, and ideas about clothing had evolved again and again. On the way home, I said quietly, "It's funny." What is? I used to think clothes decided who someone was. And now, I think they're just one way people express themselves. Emily smiled. I was hoping you'd discover that. Months after our unforgettable date, I opened the photo gallery on my phone and looked at the very first picture I had taken that evening. I compared it with a more recent one. The biggest difference wasn't the outfit. It wasn't the hairstyle. It wasn't even the smile. It was the confidence in my eyes. That nervous young man who had apologized for his own curiosity had slowly disappeared. In his place was someone who understood that confidence grows through honesty, patience, and self-acceptance rather than fear. One evening, while we were walking through the same park where Emily had explained why she planned the mystery date, I asked her something that had been on my mind for weeks. Why did you believe in me before I believed in myself? She smiled thoughtfully. Because every time you talked about fashion, your eyes lit up. Every time you complimented a dress, it wasn't because you wanted attention. It was because you genuinely appreciated it. I realized you weren't searching for permission from me. You were searching for permission from yourself. I looked across the lake where we had sat on that unforgettable afternoon. I finally found it. She slipped her hand into mine. I know. As we continued walking, I realized something that made me laugh. What? You remember the question you asked me in the cafe? The one about trusting me? I nodded. If I had said no, none of this would have happened. She smiled warmly. Maybe. But I'm very glad you said yes. I looked up at the evening sky and smiled. One ordinary date hadn't changed me into someone else. It had changed the way I understood myself. The clothes eventually became familiar. The makeup became another skill I could learn. The fear became smaller with every honest step. But the greatest change wasn't what I wore. It was that I stopped hiding from my own curiosity. Looking back, I realized Emily's greatest gift had never been the outfits, the makeup, or the surprises she planned so carefully. Her greatest gift was creating a safe space where I could discover that confidence begins the moment you stop pretending to be someone you're not. And every time I saw that small handwritten note inside the compact mirror, I smiled, because it reminded me of the lesson that one unforgettable date had taught me forever. The strongest relationships are built on trust, respect, and the freedom to explore who you are at your own pace, without fear, without shame, and without ever losing sight of yourself.